Hello, my name is Bentley, and I'm a Michters addict. I love Michters. I fell in love with it when I went to Kentucky for the first time back in 2022. And ever since then, a lot of the Michters special releases and even just the basic Michters American whiskey, bourbon, and even sour mash sometimes are some of the things that I turn to very, very regularly. And today, we're going to be reviewing one of the most sought after Michters bourbons there is every year. Michters 10-year bourbon. Now, this is a 2025 A. A lot of people know a couple years ago, 23As were crazily sought after. And on the secondary market, they're still insanely chased to a point of where they're going for anywhere between $500 and $700, depending on the specific barrel. Some of them are almost unbelievable at the rate they're going, given that that's a whiskey from only 2 years ago. Now, there's kind of a little known secret that if you are a fan of the Michters products, often the A barrels are the ones that are most commonly sent out when it comes to a lot of reviews and tend to be a honey barrel. Now, don't confuse this with a honey finish. Honey finish is very different from a honey barrel. A honey barrel is regularly used to describe, in the single barrel world, particularly high quality barrels that the distillers are choosing because they know that they're just that much better than almost everything else in the stock. And a lot of times these are things that are set aside for special projects, reserved for employee-only things, or sometimes very, very special customers typically related to charities. 23A was regarded as the big boy to chase for what had been a long time. Basically, it was considered one of the best in many, many years. So let's see if the 25A can stack up even close to a 23A or last year's 24 barrels in this 2 Minute Tuesday. This isn't a fresh crack. However, at time of filming, this got opened yesterday. I was at a bottle share with a bunch of friends, and I brought this so that we could all have a little try. And funny enough, the host had a 23G in a blind, so we were having both 23 and 25 Michters 10s to compare. Good cork. Color is looking wonderful, what you would expect out of a nicely aged bourbon, just kind of a deep amber tone. Despite the fact that this is only 94.4 proof, I think you can see right away there's some great legs forming here. So pretty good viscosity for the low proof. Let's get on the nose. Dude, I love Michters 10 noses, man. I've got a few, but it's very like oak and honey forward as far as its sweetness is concerned, but kind of underneath, and it's a little faint, but it's there. There's kind of like this strawberry and cherry note, and I don't mean like fresh fruit, more like a candy. I almost want to say like Starburst, and it's probably going to sound crazy, but have you ever had like the strawberry and cream candies? There's a certain different smell to that compared to a strawberry candy, and there's kind of that thing going on. It's just lovely. There's a little bit of like brown sugar that's going on, which you would expect. Let's get on the palate. Oh, wow. Wow. Up front, one of the things I love the most about basically all Michters products is the way that their oak influence comes in. Between that oak, there's a honey sweetness, kind of like I got on the nose, but then it goes into like this lovely kind of sweet, those like candy fruit notes are definitely there. And I will say Starburst because it kind of reminds me of that, just not as chemically. And as it gets toward like the mid and end of the palate, there's this lovely kind of like dry tobacco, like what you would use for a cigar as an example, right? Just this lovely kind of dried out and aged tobacco thing that's going on, but there's still a big dominant wood presence that goes through the entirety of the palate, and I love that. I love that a lot. Man, for only 94.4 proof, this has so much flavor. And that's one thing that I always feel like is like voodoo witchcraft that Michters does, is they get so much flavor at low proof. Man, I go back to this and like the sweetness that is present at that low proof, but that strong oak presence, it balances so well. It's such a lovely marriage, and you do get this evolution. There's, like I said, that upfront sweetness, it gets in that little kind of candy thing, then it goes in and gets a little more savory. There's just a touch of the barrel spice and the char, but it's mostly that oak influence that's really coming all the way through the finish, and it lingers quite well. Doing a good job. I'm going to get into overall score. I know that I have a giant Michters bias, and for me, this is a 90. It's got everything I want out of Michters, dialed up just enough, but the balance is so good, and it takes me for that little ride. It's not those big, crazy, punchy flavors like something like a Stag is going to give me, or an E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, or some like of the other big proofy whiskey that's come out recently. Jack Daniels, as an example, has a lot of this, and we'll talk about some Jack relatively soon. But what it does so well, because it's sweet, but it's oaky. It's got a kind of light fruitiness, but it's also got this kind of tobacco-y thing going on. It's got a little bit of barrel char, but it's still got that extra sweetness that's hanging in there. So it goes from like kind of honey to candy and a little brown sugar in there. You get all these things throughout that whole ride. And it just kind of takes you on a nice old wooden roller coasters if you've been on one. You're not doing any crazy loop-de-loops or anything really wild, but you're still having a good time. It's taking you for a ride. It's just a little more chill, a little more mellow. Man, I've yet to have a Michter's 10 disappoint me. This has given me some really good vibes. So I've obviously, like, I have a 23A. It's this one that's like barely hanging on. This has given me a lot of those vibes. Michter's has a proprietary process of seasoning their barrels, and it always gives this kind of special character to the wood influence on their bourbons, and all their products in general, but their bourbons especially. And man, I'm never let down when I taste a Michter's product because I get that. It's so much different than the wood of any other product that I'm familiar with. So it's kind of like a very distinct thing. Sometimes this can get into like Sharpie marker note, but this is not doing that at all. I love this, man. But we can't do a 2-Minute Tuesday with this many bottles lined up and just do this. So this 25A, we're now going to compare to my 24F from last year. So we know the rules: quick nose, quick taste, quick comparison, just a hip shot. Assuming you were getting both of these at the same price, would I prefer the 25 or the 24? So on the nose, the 24 is a little more ethanol-y and has just that hint of that Sharpie note, where I don't get any of that Sharpie note whatsoever in my 25A. And funny note, that 23G that I mentioned at the bottle share, when we did it blind, it tricked me a little because that Sharpie note was more prevalent, and it made me think Elijah Craig, because that's where I get that Sharpie note the most usually. But it tastes a lot better than Elijah Craig, so there's definitely like more oak, ethanol, and that Sharpie little, so it's real faint. And the sugariness, the honey that I usually get out of some of these is not as present in this 24F. Let's have a sip. Oh, man, it's there on the palate though. There's not the honey, but there's this like big brown sugar. Think like chocolate chip cookie dough with none of the chocolate in it, right? Like when you fresh made that dough, if you have a little nibble of it, it's got that nice brown sugary note. And it's there. And it's definitely got kind of that like creaminess, similar to what I mentioned in the candies, where it's like a cream candy in the 25. That creaminess is here, but not the fruity notes. This is a lot more oak and brown sugar, a little more savory, and like just a touch, little teeny tiny kind of nutty note. But it's mostly that like sugar and oak. Which one would I want? Good question. To be fair, if you don't have a Michter's 10 and you get an opportunity to get one close to or at MSRP, get one. No matter which it is, get one, because it's an experience. But in this case, I would take the 25A. I think there's just a little bit more depth and complexity going on. While the sweetness and oak presence is delicious in this 24F, there's not as much of a ride going on. It's a nice, like, steady pour all the way through, but the 25A, a little bit more depth and interestingness, and kind of takes me through a bit more of a flavor journey. But what if we compare that to 23A? Highly sought after. I was incredibly lucky to get one. I got it through an event at a local club. I was thrilled. It was the first one that I had found in the wild as opposed to traded and acquired. And obviously you can tell I put some damage on this bottle because I really like this. It's been to a couple shares too. Small ones, but shares. Man. So the sweetness is not as pronounced on the nose. Now granted, this has been open for a while and you can see how low it is. That can tame some of those notes down, but the oak on this thing is just like in your face in all the good ways. It's a very sweet oak. It's got all this lovely, lovely stuff going on the nose. Palate. It's like a religious experience. Man, I don't know how Michter's gets low-proof whiskey to taste this good. I really don't, but they just got to keep doing it because it's amazing. Similar to the 24, not as much sweetness on the nose, but man, is it there on the palate. It's honey up front, and then it goes to this big, similar brown sugar note to that 24 that I have. However, where it gets interesting, there's this lovely kind of leathery and tobacco note at about the mid-palate that stays with the oak, and it gives this big, beautiful savory thing. That underlying honey sits there the whole time through the pour. This is very similar to what I get out of like Lot B. And given that the proofs are surprisingly close, just saying, it's like drinking Lot B to me. And it's way cheaper. I think the big thing on this is that the finish lasts so much longer on the 23A. So would I have the 23A or the 25A? For me, 23A. Here's where I would say you might make a different decision though. If you like having fruit notes in your whiskey, the 25 has it. 23, not so much. Now there are some people that detect fruit notes on 23s and other Michter's 10s that I don't, but for me in particular, this doesn't really have anything. If it does, it's like a really, really faint kind of pear thing, where it's a naturally not in your face kind of flavor. It's more like a complementary flavor, and a lot of what I'm getting is the honey and oak presence. To be fair, this is amazing whiskey. If I were going to rate these, I would say, like, numerically speaking, with that 90 for 25A, I would give it about an 88 on the 24F that I have, and my 23A would be about a 91. So very small difference, and a lot of that is just because they're both taking me for a ride. It's just slightly different rides, and it would depend day to day probably which of those notes I want more on my palate, whether I want that little extra fruitiness, that kind of fruit candy thing, or whether I want that big lingering honey note that just sits underneath and brings a passive sweetness to all those wonderful kind of savory oak and leather things that are going on. If you get an opportunity, get yourself a Michter's 10. Treat yourself. These are phenomenal low-proof whiskeys. Even I've found a lot of friends that are not into low-proof whiskey still will give this a lot of love because of the amount of complex and lingering flavors you get, even though it's only 94.4 proof. It's a very, very good whiskey. That's it. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, leave a comment down below, and consider subscribing. It's one of the best ways that you can help whiskey channels like mine grow absolutely for free, and it tells the magical YouTube algorithm like, hey, I like this, and someone else might too. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.